Okay, so this one is the next one on the list, which was Understanding Aboriginal Identity by Bearpaw Media and Education. And Alexandra Lazarovich is the narrator of this film. So and she's from Whitefish Nation. So she's focusing on identity in this movie, and it's basically explaining that this is not something that can be decided, or like maybe should be decided by the Indian Act, but it's actually a very personal thing that's connected to things like land and language and culture and your family and like things like that. So basically it starts off about talking about how the Europeans came in and started to sort of categorize and label, and these ideas carry through today. And it talks about like how the government has in these categories that they've created been able to successfully, like fairly successfully, create a definition of who is and isn't legally considered an Indigenous person. So, and that's written up in the Indian Act. So it talks about the problematic aspects for that. For instance, the category of First Nation with no real definition. So that's done for the benefit of settlers, so that where this person doesn't fit the criteria needed, that can be highlighted like as a deficiency, and then that person can be excluded. So therefore, the true intention of the government can be fully realized in that way. So, and then it switches from here into this the part of the film featuring Peter Cardinal, and he's from the Kikino Métis settlement, and he's basically shows you the reality of the people and the people there and what he considers important that makes him who he is. So he's immediately talking about like land. And he's like the size of the area, he's talking about where that is, and he's also an entrepreneur, so he's talking about self-determination. He's raising bison, so he's talking about his relationship with all things. So he's able to explain in his own words and experience how this conflicts directly with what you're told about Indigenous people in Canada. And then it goes through a couple more people and how they determine their identity through connection with their family and their ancestors and things like that. So I guess it's the point there is that it's never really been something that's determined by the federal government. And this sort of brings me back to week 4, actually, and Iron Eyes Cody and the conflict with the story, because it's very political. And I think like my first idea is to say, like, wow, here's this guy that's not even Indigenous, and he's appropriating and he's succeeding in it, like you prick, right? And I do kind of feel this way, but I also feel like when we really consider how Indigenous cultures identify, and then we think about like the act and how that is trying to identify, I think that when we continue to determine who is or isn't, that sort of adds to that ideology. And so I think it's important to resist against that, but I'm still sort of working through that idea. It said in the film, there was one person, and I didn't get their name, but they said that we have to be realistic about the fact that our societies and our lives are impacted by colonialism, but we don't have to be defined by that. So I think the point of that is that there's ways of identifying that are personal and can't be defined by and shouldn't be defined by maybe like how they are now through the act. And that's also kind of conflicting for me, because I want to say, hey, like if this was the case, I likely wouldn't be, like I would likely be where I was in 2010, which was like I was pretty pissed off with all of this. So, and I remember like when this bill passed, I was in Truro at the time, and I got in a conversation with a guy that was from Millbrook, and he didn't agree with the decision. And I didn't really fully see his side of it, but I listened to it, and I think about that a lot. And how he was totally against it, and how he felt that, it would hurt his people overall. So, and I don't want to agree with just like whatever makes me comfortable. So, I'm still working through these ideas. Because I know that there's also a lot of people that maybe, I think intention is really, really important. And I think there's a lot of people that like don't really have maybe their intention's not like fully thought out, or like not in the best place or whatnot. So but again, that's like a judgment, right? So it's like, oh, it's like you go back and forth, and it's like super confusing. But yeah, so those are the readings for this week, and I'll see you in class.